I made a vow in front of a Buddha our statue to give out chocolate in exchange of something I cannot remember till today. However, I love chocolates, and when I was offered chocolates by my friend, I ate them. After that, I will feel guilty. Kindly advise me what I should do. Thank you very much.
Well, our teachers remind us when we make an adhitthana, or determination to do something or to give up something, you have to make it with wisdom. So that means you can't, or it's not wise, it's not good to make an adhitthana or a determination that's too tough on you, that you can't complete, because then you'll very easily feel disappointed and your mind becomes weaker rather than stronger. So sounds like our friend has a strong passion for chocolate. So sometimes you just have to accept your attachment, your desire for chocolate is so strong you're not ready to give it up. And so if you have made a determination to give up chocolate and then you break that, it's not good, is it? Because you're like you say, you feel guilty, you feel weak, you feel I'm not doing what I set out to do. One thing you can do, practical thing, is you make a decision either to just give up that determination. It's too difficult for you because your attachment is too strong and you're not ready to give up that attachment. So maybe look at other things you can do, either around chocolate itself, or maybe look at some other part of your practice that you can work on, and maybe other determinations about other things. But don't make one that you can't keep. So once you've broken it, you have to be careful because you will feel guilty. So you just have to clear the slate. I'll start again. And if you're feeling ready, you say, this time I'll really commit to it, and you tell all your friends beforehand, so they know, so they won't be offering you chocolate, and they can help. Then you really stick to what you've decided. Or maybe you don't say for the rest of my life, you say, I won't eat chocolate for the 3 months of the range retreat. Now we're in the annual range retreat, it's a good time to give up things like that. Or for a period of time, and then you, at the end of the period of time, if you completed it, then you move on and maybe extend the period of time. So making determinations, resolutions are one method to make your mind really firm with a goal. You've identified something that maybe you need to change about yourself. And you've identified that, now you're going to set your mind on giving something up or making yourself do something. So you can use a resolution to get up at a certain time in the morning, to keep 8 precepts once a week or something. There's so many different ways you can use the power of adhitthana. This is what it is. It's adhitthana bharani. You can be creative and think what you need, but don't make a resolution for something you can break easily, because then you get very disappointed with yourself and your mind doesn't grow, it actually goes backwards sometimes. Another danger is you make a resolution and you can keep it, but as you're keeping it you get very angry. So say you decided to give up chocolate and then your friends are eating chocolate but you're not, and you sit there and you start getting really annoyed with them and take it out on them. Well, that's not good, because you may be giving up chocolate over here, which is a good thing, but over here you're being angry with your friends and maybe you say a few nasty words to them because you're so angry, which is not good. So you have to try and make a reasonable assessment of what will help you in your practice. And you can always start again with the chocolate, or just adjust the guidelines for your resolution so you don't break it. You resolve something a bit more simple. And you can't resolve things that are not within your power. So like some people say, why can't I think I'll just make a determination not to get angry. But you may not be able to stop anger arising, but you can make a determination to keep 5 precepts. So if you get angry, you won't act on the anger, you won't hurt anyone physically, you won't verbally abuse anyone, take out your anger in your speech. That much you can agree to and make a resolution. But you can't make a resolution simply not to get angry. You can't do it through willpower. That has to be done through mindfulness, wisdom, recognizing anger as a source of suffering, and then little by little letting it go until it no longer arises. So there's plenty of scope to use Adhitthana Bharami, but try and use it skillfully.
Next question. Dear Ajahn, sometimes I feel overwhelmed with these things for this life. I know I should use it to motivate my practice and so on, but sometimes I cannot and just have to grapple with this sense of suffering. Grateful for your advice, please. Sadhu.
Well, I think most of us have that experience from time to time, some more than others. It's one reason why you'll see the whole of the Buddhist path involves a certain amount of skillful action that brings up joy and happiness. So the practice of dana, sila, kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, mudita, upekkha, understanding that everyone has their karma. Sometimes there's nothing we can do to help someone who's suffering. Maybe there's many skillful practices and skillful mind states we are cultivating which develop a positive experience for us, and that can help counter or cushion the effect of seeing the negative side of life. Of course, life is mixed up with a lot of pain and suffering. And the Buddha didn't hold any punches when he described what dukkha is. You read some of the suttas about what is dukkha. Birth is dukkha. Already that's something many people deny. They say, oh, birth is great, we're having a baby. And of course, there's a lot of happiness in it. But it's painful. Ask the mothers. Having a baby is painful. Bringing up a baby is painful. Aging, sickness and death are suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, fear, anxiety, they're all suffering. So there's plenty of suffering mixed in with our experience. So as we're becoming aware of that, that can be quite overwhelming for us, challenging for us to keep a level head. So we also bring out very good qualities to enjoy, so we enjoy our practice as well. So you practice meditation. Meditation isn't all about watching suffering, it's also about developing mindfulness on an object like the breath and enjoying the breath, becoming peaceful, enjoying that breath, states of piti, raja, sukha, happiness, the mind becomes more calm. These are some of the enjoyable parts of the practice. And you see the Buddha said develop dana, so the basic practice of giving, sharing, sila, keeping precepts, living in a harmless way. And then samatha bhavana is just learning to calm the mind, let go of the 5 hindrances, let go of stress, and experience some happiness, joy and happiness in your mind from the meditation. And then finishing off with vipassana. So once your mind is calm and you have a sense of well-being, then to contemplate these 3 universal characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Your mind can cope with some of the insights that arise because you have a basis in dana and sila and samatha bhavana. So it's like when somebody is really hurt, broken arms, broken legs, you prepare a bed for them and you put them down and you give them all these cushions so the pain of their broken limbs isn't too extreme when they lie down. They still have pain because they've got a broken arm or a broken leg. but you put the cushions there just so they can lie down and feel at least a little bit better. So when you're contemplating impermanence, suffering, and not self, the deep truths of existence, you're contemplating Four Noble Truths, suffering, end of suffering, you have the sense of well-being from all the good karma you're making in practicing Dhamma, keeping sila, you have the calm of samadhi as your cushion. It's like your pillows, your cushion, so your mind can cope with seeing the pain and suffering of life. If you read the commentaries on the practice of Vipassana, you have all the Vipassana jnanas, the insights into the true nature of physical, mental phenomena, this whole world. A lot of those insights are quite difficult, aren't they? There's fear, seeing the rising and ceasing of sankharas, the fact that everything is impermanent. So what do I depend on? What do I rely on in life? What can I grab onto if everything is impermanent? And for many people, they find that brings up some fear, some anxiety, especially in the beginning. But if you have some good states of mind, some sense of well-being from your practice of Dhamma and Sila and your meditation, then when you have that insight, you can cope with seeing the fact that everything is impermanent. Or one day I will have to die, or you have to die, your loved ones will have to die. And that's a thought most people don't want to think about. Nobody wants to think about the death of their loved ones. And yet it's truth, isn't it? Nobody lasts forever. So how do you deal with a difficult truth like that? When you prepare your mind. So somebody who's practiced Dhamma and Sila, calm their mind in meditation, when they think about death or impermanence, they can accept that truth better. Because they're more cushioned, they're more prepared for it, their mind is softer, has a sense of well-being. So you have to see the different parts of the Buddhist path support our understanding. If you go straight into contemplating impermanence, you've never done any Dhamma, you don't keep precepts, you just think about everything is impermanent, this world is impermanent, and you probably just become depressed. There's nothing. Like watching the news. You watch the news is all about death, destruction, problems, crime, financial problems, wars, conflicts, everything. It's all bad news, isn't it? Because that's what sells. So you watch the news, if you don't have a good space in your heart, you'll start to feel depressed when you watch the news. You walk around saying, what is the world coming to? And it's like every news item is very depressing. But the fact that you can watch it for at least for a while is because you have some other good qualities there which balance things. So as you also focus on dukkha, you also have to cultivate merit. So you're making merit, making good karma, practicing kindness, generosity, being helpful, and then you're developing some joy. If you practice meditation, you calm your mind first, bring up the happiness of a peaceful mind. Then you reflect doing your Vipassana, contemplating impermanence, and then you can accept it. So those monks, like downstairs we have statues of Luang Por Sao, Luang Por Man, and all of their students, sometimes they spend time sitting in the forest contemplating a corpse, seeing themselves as a corpse. It's a very depressing kind of thought, isn't it? Oh, I'm just a corpse, this body is made up of blood and bones, and eventually I will die. It doesn't sound very happy at all. And yet, because their minds were well adjusted and well prepared and they're peaceful, that contemplation liberated them from a lot of delusion and attachment and suffering. You have to stop and think about that. How on earth can seeing yourself as a corpse bring you happiness? Because you're removing delusions that constantly affect our mind. Once these delusions are gone, your mind is seeing the truth, and you're not fooled by your attachments anymore, so your mind is free. It's actually in a better place. But in the beginning of the practice, we still have attachment, so the thought of contemplating your body and seeing it as a corpse, or 32 parts of the body, and all the different parts that we chant and the chanting. It doesn't sound a very attractive idea at all. It may seem quite depressing. But later, maybe when your mind is calm and balanced, then you can appreciate why they do this. And those monks, they meditated and they said, contemplating the impermanence of the body makes my mind very happy, because I let it go. But in the beginning, that doesn't sound like happiness, does it? In the beginning, that sounds like hard work. It sounds like depressing sort of thing to do. So you have to build up to that. So you practice Dhamma, you keep the precepts, and you do your samatha bhavana, make your mind calm, and then you're ready for insight.
How does one live a confident life whereby he or she is confident of their life choices and not regretting them? Thank you.
You have to keep learning, don't you? Choice is about learning. Who can know everything ahead of time? Before you make any decision or choice, you'll know some things and some things you won't know. Especially when you're young. When you're young, you don't know anything. You think you know, but you don't know much because you haven't lived in the world yet. And even as you get older, if you don't train your mind to look and understand things, you tend to just always go according to your views and opinions, which may be correct, may be wrong. So when you make choices and make decisions in life, you have to be willing to review them, look at the results of your decision you made and review it, and maybe say, that was wrong. Sometimes it's the wisest thing is to admit you made a wrong choice. Or you may find what you did was correct and it led to a good outcome and you're happy about that. And that's good as well. But we learn a lot from our mistakes. And it's not like from day one in life you know everything and you make all the right decisions. A lot of our wisdom, our intelligence and our growth as human beings, we become better people for our mistakes. And once you made a mistake, you review it, and that was the wrong thing to do. Well, now you can avoid doing that same thing again. You can change your behavior, you can make a different choice, and you become a better person. Usually from day one when you're a kid, you start learning things, don't you? And you're learning through making mistakes. When you want to walk, when you're 2 years old, and you walk and then you fall over, and it hurts, and you don't like it, and you cry, and you sit there crying, and mum comes along, get out, we'll walk again. You walk again, and okay, I'm going to walk like the big guys, the adults. And then you fall again. How many times did you fall over before you could walk? You can't even remember, can you? So many times, so long ago. But you fell over many times. If you're learning to ride a bicycle, you fall over a few times. Or learning anything in life. You're learning to drive a car, and you make mistakes. One guy, a young guy in Melbourne, he got in the car before he got his license and passed his test, and he thought he could drive, and he drove down the street, and he got on the main road. He was so frightened with all these cars whizzing by, he moved into the side and then he just hit a whole row of stationary cars. And the police came and said, "What happened?" He said, "I got so scared driving, I got it all wrong." He just made all this damage before he even got his driving license. It's just a big mistake. But now he understands that was a mistake, and now he's changed his behavior. We do that. We make mistakes in our job, in our relationship. We make mistakes with money. We don't spend all our money and then realize we're in debt. And then we have to pay off the debt. We make mistakes in meditation. Sometimes we try too hard and make ourselves miserable. Sometimes we don't try hard enough and we just fall asleep. You're learning, aren't you? You're learning from decisions and choices. Some of them go well, and you say that went well, and you do it again, you repeat it. And sometimes you say, that didn't go well, I'll change, I won't do that again, then I'm going to carry on in a different direction. And life is really all about that, isn't it? Learning from the things we do. So the Buddha encouraged us, before you do anything, think about it. Is this going to be for my benefit, for the benefit of others, or is it going to cause some suffering? And then as you're doing that thing that you've decided to do, you're saying some words, you've made a decision to do some action, while you're doing it, reflect again. Because sometimes you thought it would be good, and then as you're doing, you realise you made a mistake, so you should stop. Once you realise, stop. Or you realise it was a good thing, so you carry on. And then afterwards, one more time, you've done that thing, you've said those words, reflect one more time, was it really good? Was it good for me or good for them? And if you can be sure it was a useful, good thing to do, produce some happiness for you, for others, then that's fine. But if it didn't, then that's a mistake you have to learn from. And you say, I'm not going to do that again. If you get into that habit, before, during, after, before, during, after, before, during, after, through your life, you get very careful about the decisions you make, the choices you make. So it doesn't necessarily mean you know everything ahead of time, but you're willing to learn and then change according to what happens.
Hello Ajahn. When trying to mindfully observe my mind, I find it easier to see the cessation of mental states rather than their arising. Can Ajahn advise how to better catch what causes our mental states, both positive and negative, to arise? I think I lack sufficient continuous mindfulness. Thank you.
Is it they see negative mind states easier? Is it?
Easier to see the cessation of mind states rather than their arising.
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's a very good thing to focus on. And it's something we're often not aware of, isn't it? We tend to notice the next thought, the next plan, the next thought about what I'm going to do. We want to schedule today, what are we going to do next? When's the next meditation session? We're always thinking about the beginning of the next act. If your life is like a series of scenes in a movie or a play or a TV show, it's always what is the next act. And then you should also sometimes notice the ending of the previous act. Oh, that just finished. So we just had the meal and then a break. So that break has finished, the meal finished. Or I read a question, reads a question and then I give an answer and then the answer finishes. It's a practice you can do. Just notice the finishing or the cessation of experiences. Thoughts arise but then they cease and then they're gone. Feelings arise but then they cease and they're gone. And you can get into that habit of just going to the cessation. First it's a bit challenging because you'll be caught out by the arising of the next thing and you get lost in that. But if you train yourself, keep watching the cessation of experience, thoughts, feelings, sensations in your body, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone. It's one way to become very clear on the changing nature of our experience. And again, that can be a little bit challenging because every time you start something, you know this will finish. And you're waiting for the end because that's what you're focused on. You're mindful of the cessation. So it kind of undermines something you may be enjoying. So like meal time, it's like, oh, I'm enjoying this food, but it's about to end. This pleasant taste will then stop. You have one mouthful, then you swallow it and it's gone. Or you meet your friend and you go to see your friend for a coffee or something and you're happy about it, but then you're focusing on the fact that, oh, but in half an hour's time we'll finish this conversation and move on. You know? So it already undermines your ability to sort of indulge happiness and pleasure sometimes, because you're seeing everything doesn't last. But if you do it with a wise attitude, maybe you bring up mindfulness and you're just looking and learning from your experience, or you can say, oh yeah, everything is arising and ceasing, and you notice the cessation, the change of things. You can use that to help you. Say you're feeling really stressed, they have that reflection, this too will pass. Being really angry, this too will pass. You know it will pass because you've seen it cease before. So you can use it to your advantage. So next time you're angry, then you know this will not last, it will change. Then you can step back from your anger or your worry or your fear. I know this is bad at the moment, but it will change because I've seen it change before. So focusing on that end of impermanence, impermanence is basically arising or ceasing. That helps you to understand your experience better, and if you find that helpful, well, why not? You can do it a lot, and helps you to let go a little bit when you're feeling really down. So say if you're feeling really sad, you'll notice it's a mood that arises and it ceases. So say sometimes like this, you're sitting here feeling fairly normal, you can just reflect back and say, yesterday I felt really sad or really angry or really worried about something, but right now that thought, that emotion is gone because I feel normal. And that's teaching you something, isn't it? That's teaching you that these moods, these mental states arise and cease. If you're right now, you're not experiencing it, that means it ceased, doesn't it? It's gone. And that's wisdom. That helps you. Then maybe next time you're about to get angry, you go, let's just fast forward to the cessation. And save everyone the trouble of all this angry thinking and worrying and getting angry and shouting or whatever you do when you get angry. I'll just fast forward to the cessation and then, okay, over. What's next? You can do it, can't you? If it helps, do it. So yes, it's a very valid way to practice focus on cessation. Helping you to see that characteristic in your experience.
Dear Ajahn, is it okay to stop breathing to control my breath a while when there's many thoughts? It works, I become more focused, but at times headache arises. Please advise. Thank you.
Yeah, if you're doing it as a mindful technique to cut through endless thinking, restless states of mind where you just keep thinking, there's nothing you can do to stop it. Well, just try it, experiment, holding your breath for 1 minute. For a few seconds it won't change much. If you hold your breath for a whole minute, or even 2 minutes, whatever you were thinking about will quickly fade, and you'll come back to the actual experience of holding your breath, and the thought, when am I going to breathe again, will come very strongly to you. Because you're worried, when am I going to breathe again? You're in charge, so you're in control. You don't have to worry about other people in this practice. You're just cutting through those thoughts that seemed so important when you were thinking them. But you're kind of teaching yourself a lesson. You say, okay, if these thoughts about my work or what happened yesterday or whatever, if they're so important, then when I hold my breath, they should carry on. But as soon as you hold your breath and you realize that if you don't breathe again, you'll die, those thoughts are put into a new light, a new perspective. Suddenly it's like, they're not that important after all, are they? If you're going to die, if you don't let yourself breathe, those thoughts don't matter at all. Don't let them go. So it's just one angle or one way you can maybe get some perspective on an issue that's bothering your mind. You're just thinking, suddenly you interrupt it. So you can experiment, see if it works.
How to stop myself from sleeping during meditation?
Well, this is a big obstacle for, I think most of us sooner or later have to face this, so it is a good question. There's different aspects to this. So the Buddha said, strangely enough, the person who had trouble with sleepiness in their meditation was Venerable Moggallana. I don't know if you know the lives of the Arahants, but Moggallana was the one with the best samadhi, the most psychic powers, best mind control of all the monks. And he had problems with sleepiness, so it tells you something. It's like, every Olympic champion will tell you about all the frustrations of when they were training and all the things that went wrong, and all their problems. Every concert pianist will tell you about all the disasters they went through before they were good enough to do a concert. Everyone who's good at anything, if you've learned to cook, you'll have gone through many times where you made some lousy food before you can cook well. That's part of learning again, isn't it? And so Venerable Moggallana in the beginning was beset by sleepiness, so he told the Buddha, I'm having trouble with sleepiness. So obviously his samadhi was not established yet, so that's telling you one thing, that even the expert originally wasn't an expert. So it gives you hope, doesn't it? You could all be Venerable Moggallana's in waiting. Maybe one day you'll have jhanas and psychic powers and you'll be able to fly through the air. Because he had this problem too. He also had sleepiness. And the Buddha said, well, there's certain things you can focus on. One is the light, the perception of light. The easiest way to do that, if you're sitting here and you've got eyes closed, open your eyes. And you look at the Buddha behind me. And the room is light. And light wakes us up, doesn't it? It's a bit more stimulating than sitting in the dark with your eyes closed. So just waking up with the light of the room. Sitting up straight helps. Put more effort back into your posture. Sit up straight. Open your eyes for a while. Another good one is recitation, reciting Dhamma. So it could be chanting, or a sutta, or a teaching you know before. So it could be one or two words, or a whole phrase, or a whole chant. And if you're in a group, well, maybe you just silently or quietly recite to yourself. If you're on your own, then you recite out loud, and that will wake you up, because the words will stimulate your mind. You have to work harder to chant, don't you, to recite words. So it wakes you up. And this is what monks do a lot of the time when they're sleeping, is to recite chanting, or they memorize, learn new chanting. And that stimulates the mind in a good way until the samadhi comes up again, and they're more bright. Or the perception of light, Ajahn Chah used to say, light a candle. Well, nowadays you have all kinds of electric candles and things. You can put one in front of you, you focus on that. And you're focusing on the light, and you memorize the light, and it brightens your mind. Because you notice when sleepiness disappears, your mind seems brighter inside, not just on the outside, inside. Your mind brightens up again. And literally it can be just suddenly your mind brightens because the mindfulness has come up and it's kind of pushed away the dullness or the drowsiness. So it could be recitation, it could be focusing on the light, opening your eyes. And then there's other practical things. The Buddha said, go and wash your face. It's a very obvious one. Cold water on your face wakes you up. And the Buddha said, grab your ears. Pull your ears. Like when I was a schoolboy, I'm from England, so at school when you're talking too much or you're sleeping at the back of the room, the teacher comes up and he always pulls your ear. And you go, ow! And you wake up. So it could be pulling your ears, or it could be walking meditation. If you're sitting and you're just so sleepy you can't wake up, go outside and walk. Ajahn Chah said if your walking meditation doesn't wake you up, walk backwards. Because if you walk backwards, you're scared of hitting something or tripping over it, so you become more aware. In our monastery in Melbourne, we go outside and we walk in the dark night sky, which is cold, and that helps to wake you up, or the fear of hitting an animal. Because in our monastery we have a lot of animals at night. I had tripped over a wombat before. Wombat about that size. And we have deer, and these are big deer, and when you walk too near them, to them, they go, whack! Wake you up. We don't have many snakes at night. The snakes are good. They don't only come out in the day. At night they're asleep, so that helps. But in Singapore or Thailand, certainly they have a lot of snakes. So at night, if you're walking outside, you have to be careful. So walking outside at night can be a way to wake you up. Well, the last thing the Buddha said is if you're so sleepy, nothing works, well, just go to sleep. Have a rest. Maybe it's a sign you just didn't get enough sleep. You rest, and then the next time you get up and you meditate again, once you rest.
How to practice non-self in daily life? Will non-self lead to no compassion?
Obviously, non-self, seeing anatta, is a very advanced, mature practice. So, those who truly see non-self are not going to get caught into being cold and having no compassion. It will come together with compassion. But as you're practicing, you may sometimes reflect on non-self, and your other spiritual faculties or parami are not developed yet. So, yeah, it could lead to that. So you might say non-self with wrong view. What's non-self with wrong view? Well, after you've eaten dinner, someone else cooks dinner for you, and there's a whole pile of washing up to do, and you say, washing up is non-self, I'm leaving. And you don't help. That's the tricky way of doing non-self, where you're just too tricky, you're too clever for your own good, and you avoid doing things that you should do, or you're selfish, or you lose your compassion. Buddhism is taught on these two levels. You have the conventional level. So the conventional level is you're a person with a name and a family, and you have a role in your life. You're in your family, you're a child, you're a parent, you're a husband, you're a wife. You might go to work, you have a job, you have a boss, you have a place of work, you're a citizen of Singapore. All kinds of levels of identification, which we call conventional reality. And with that comes responsibilities, obligations, the practice of compassion. So anyone in the world, if you really were so cold that you didn't help the people in your family, you didn't keep your house clean, you didn't do your bit. Obviously some people do more than others, but if you didn't do anything, then everyone would say, you've got no compassion. You might say, well, everything is not self, it doesn't matter. But nobody will believe you. They'll think, who is this person? They'll look down on you, and you probably have a lot of problems in your life. So on the conventional level, there is a self, and that self has to do things. There's a self who makes karma. So if you're selfish, and you're unkind or cruel to the people around you, that's bad karma, it will come back on you. You don't feel good about yourself, you won't respect yourself, your relationship with other people won't be very good. So on this conventional level, yes, there's a self who needs to fulfill duties, responsibilities. Obviously, interpretations of that, they vary, don't they? But generally speaking, there's a self who needs to do things. But on the higher level, what we call Paramattha Dhamma, then there is no self. We're just the collection of four elements: earth, air, fire, water, and five khandhas: body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, sense consciousness. These five khandhas are constantly arising and ceasing, and therefore there's not a fixed self in any of them. And that's an insight you may have as you practice meditation more and more. But you still have to do the washing up. You might have insight into the selfless nature of the five khandhas. You may be an arahant, but you still have to do the washing up because you're living in the world. So the Buddha, for monks who may have insight, deep insight into not self, they still have to follow the rules of monks. It's not like when you become an arahant, you don't have to do anything. You still have to come to this recitation of the monks' rules every fortnight. It's called Patimokkha, which is what Palelai here they'll do, and in the other monasteries they'll do. Just because you're an arahant doesn't mean to say you can't come to that meeting, or that you suddenly don't have to follow the rules and you can become a horrible person, be cruel, selfish, or whatever bad things a monk could do. Just because you're an arahant, you couldn't start doing those things. You still have to follow the conventions of the world. And the Buddha said this is one aspect of our wisdom. You may see not self and understand not self, but you still know how to relate to people on a wise, normal way, practical way. You don't become so kind of removed from society that you can't talk or look after yourself or do other things. But one of the reasons Ajahn Chah was such a loved teacher is because people could see he had deep, profound insight into non-self, but he still came out and did his chanting and followed the rules and wore his robes and helped with the sweeping and had all kinds of natural expressions of compassion and mindfulness in daily life as well. He didn't give all that up. And I think most of the forest monks I lived in, some of them were considered to be arahants, had deep insight into not self. It's not like they stop functioning as human beings. Quite the opposite. They often do much more for other people than an ordinary person, because their whole life becomes an offering back to the community. So they teach a lot. They help organize good things, charity projects, monasteries. They run monasteries. They have a lot of warmth. So they show their warmth to help people who are suffering in different ways. They only show their compassion more for seeing not self. Because if you think about it, once you have insight into not self, there's no more selfish desire left. You're not selfish anymore. So then you don't get angry. You're not greedy. You don't hoard your wealth. Who are the people who are the most generous in the world? Well, arahants. They've got nothing left to achieve, nothing left to prove, nothing left to hoard. They're not stingy anymore, so they just give. So monks like Ajahn Chah give every day. Always giving in one way or another, and not just to people, even to animals. Ajahn Chah would walk through the forest and see a forest chicken. He'd take the time to stop and say, "Look, chicken, there's a lot of civet cats and pythons around. You better make sure you sleep on a high branch tonight." You get it. He talked to the chickens and warned them of the dangers. Whether they understood or not, I don't know. He would feed chickens, he would feed animals, he would be compassionate to animals as well as people. That's the mind of someone who's really seen no self. They have no more preferences or agendas, hidden agendas. They have no more selfishness. Whereas, the sort of unenlightened person who is pretending to have seen insight into not self, and they say, "Oh, everything is not self, I'm not doing the washing up now."
Thank you, Ajahn. During meditation, when the breath becomes soft and the body feels light, I have the feeling like floating and drifting in calm waves. Am I in the right way? What should I do? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So last bit, heavy inside.
When the breath becomes soft and the body feels light, I have the feeling like floating and drifting in calm waves. Am I in the right way? What should I do?
Keep going. Keep meditating. Maintain your mindfulness. Because piti and sukha, which is what you've been describing. They come up sometimes very strongly, sometimes mildly, but they have a distracting effect on your mind. So sometimes you feel waves of joy, rapture, bliss, and then you're floating, you feel like you're floating. And then the next thing your mind does is go, oh, what's happening? What is this? You get interested or fascinated in this, in the piti and sukha, rather than staying with the mindfulness of the breath. So that's what you really want to do, is come back to your breath and maintain your mindfulness. And we say one point to your mind. So piti and sukha are like signposts on the way telling you, oh yes, you're practicing in the right way. These are good qualities and they're very nourishing to our practice. They're very helpful to us. But they can also be a little bit deluding or distracting. So you have to come back to your main mindfulness object, gather your energy and your attention, bring it back in, and keep meditating as long as you can. And the piti and sukha should help you, because when you experience some joy, some rapture, well then painful feelings tend to fade out, don't they? And you don't feel bored, you don't feel restless. You are happy to keep practicing. You can go longer. So keep doing it. And Ajahn Chah used to say, it's like, the villagers in the fields when they are fishing in the paddy fields, the rice fields, they have these nets, they throw them out and then they gather them together to catch freshwater fish from the fields. And they're gathering until they got the net closed, and then they've got a few fish in there they can keep. And so your mind is like that, you've got to gather it together. And one of the dangers with piti and sukha is it's kind of taking your mind out again. It's pleasant, and you can lose your awareness, you lose your mindfulness. Sometimes you just become a little bit dull because what you're experiencing is better than before. Before you were stressed, thinking too much, had painful legs or something. Now with the piti and sukha you feel better, feel more calm, more relaxed, which is good. But then you accept that's what I want, that's good enough. I don't need to do anything else. So you start to relax too much and your mind sort of flows out into this enjoyable experience, and then you're no more mindfulness. And you've gone into dullness maybe, or you're just sitting there kind of numb. And it might take a long time before you can bring your attention back. So your aim is to actually gather your energy back into the one-pointedness. That's your aim, keep it there. So you are aware of the joy and the happiness. You don't have to suppress it or do anything with it. You're aware of it, but bring your mind back to one-pointedness. And just that point where the breath becomes very shallow, very refined, and the movement seems to stop and you become still. And stillness, you maintain the stillness as long as you can. Enjoy it, because it's better than anything else, but the stillness is what gives rise to equanimity, which is the quality that's very hard to develop, but very useful for us. Because equanimity means your mind is still, it's not moving. So it's bright, energized. Once you achieve stillness, one-pointedness, then your mind is ready to contemplate everything else and see everything else as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. If your mind is still, everything else is put into perspective. You can see everything. Like me here, sitting here now, if you're all moving around, if you were all moving around, I could hardly see anyone, could I? I couldn't see the details of your faces, how you're dressed, because you're all moving around. But if you're still, then I can see who you are, your face, your clothes. Our mind is like that. It needs the stillness so that it can look more closely at what it's experiencing. And you can channel that energy to really understand whether it's the body, or feelings, or the mind, the state of mind itself. And we were talking earlier about cessation. If your mind is still, then arising and ceasing of experience become very clear. When you're still and as thoughts come and go, and you don't lose your stillness. your one-pointedness, well then that movement of arising and ceasing becomes very obvious. And you can see it's also suffering, because what's moving, arising and ceasing, it can't be any kind of permanent happiness. So you need to keep coming back to the one-pointedness and just deepen that, strengthen that. One more question?
So, there's only 5 more minutes, so maybe one last question.
Okay.
Dear Ajahn, how do we care and love without attaching? Thank you.
You have to care and love like a Buddha. That's a big ask, but we have a pathway. Certainly in the beginning, I know it's difficult, isn't it? Your parents bring you up, so you naturally love them, attach to them. Your parents love and attach to you because they brought you up. You have brothers and sisters, so it's funny, isn't it? Even when brothers and sisters get annoyed with each other and hate each other, they still love each other. They're still attached to each other. Friends can be the same. You notice, love and attachment are really two sides of the same thing. And even when you hate someone, you're still attaching to them, because to hate someone, you have to push them away, don't you? So if it's an object that you don't like, so a person that you don't like, at that moment, to get rid of them because you don't like them, you have to push them away. But that's still attaching to them, you're moving them with this hand. If you're equanimous, you don't have to do that. You just go, oh, that person is not lovable. But you know it, but you don't do anything about it, you just know it. Equanimity is more like that, isn't it? Oh, they have some unlovable qualities. They annoy me. They don't do the washing up. So you know it, but you don't have to react with aversion or push them away or pull them to you. So if somebody is lovable, you know, oh, this person has lovable qualities. But you don't have to pull them towards you. You don't have to get so involved with them. You just know them. That's what you're aiming for through practice. And of course, the ones who it's hardest to do it with is family, closest family and friends, because you're with them all the time. So you build up this automatic attachment, whether you like them or not. It's just automatic. So you have to keep contemplating that. And so the Buddha said every day reflect. Birth, birth is suffering, and I can't avoid that. You're all born. Aging is suffering, and you can't avoid that. Sickness is suffering, and you can't avoid it. You do your best to keep healthy, but we all get a little bit sick or a lot sick. And then death is normal. You just can't avoid it. So you start applying that reflection to the people you love. My mum, my dad will get old, get sick and die. When somebody dies, you separate from everything you love about them and everything you hate about them. All the things of the world are similar, all the beautiful experiences, the pleasures, the enjoyable things of this world, one day you must separate from them through death. You bring up that reflection. The Buddha said every day, aging, sickness and death are normal, separation from all I love and like is normal. This is educating or learning. You're learning, you're educating your mind to see the true nature of life in this world. It doesn't mean to say you give up on having a family or a relationship or you ignore your kids or whatever. It's just as you interact with them, you have this wisdom there. One day we will separate. And at first it's very difficult to accept. Your mind doesn't even want to think about it, does it? Who wants to think about the death of their loved ones? But you should. You should bring this subject up for reflection. And if you bring it up, you gradually become more used to it. Your mind opens to it, accepts it. You can be at peace with it because you know it's the truth. And it doesn't make you cold. It doesn't mean to say your relationships don't matter. What it does is it means your time together is limited, and you realize that, so you cherish your relationships. You look after them because you know you won't be there that long. So we have to work at this slowly. You love your parents, your children, your wife, your husband, your friend, but you at the same time remind yourself, we won't be here forever. They won't be here forever, I won't be here forever, you won't be here forever. So it's a hard truth, but you learn a lot of Dhamma that way. And the more you can see this, then the more you can relate to these people from Dhamma rather than just bias. If you don't contemplate impermanence, then you relate to people, I like this one, so I favour them and give them all my support and love and time. I hate this one, so I try and get rid of them, and I hurt them, or whatever. But if you see the Dhamma of impermanence, you realise your friends, your enemies, the ones you like, the ones you don't like. Equally, one day you must separate from them all. So you don't need to form, you don't need to seek revenge and form enmity, hostility with people, because one day you'll separate anyway. And that karma will catch up with them if something they've done is wrong. But also the ones you love, you shouldn't get too clingy, too close, because that's a delusion, and one day you'll suffer from the separation. So if you have someone you really love because they've done so much for you, you appreciate it, good. But then try to see it more in impersonal terms. So the good of that person, their good qualities, some of the good actions they've done, the things you emulate and aspire to follow in that person. That much you can identify with and hold on to maybe. But the person themselves, you know it's inevitable they will separate from you till death. So don't bother trying to hold on too much. You don't want them to end up dying and becoming a ghost floating around. Ask yourself, where do ghosts come from? The people who can't accept death and they're clinging on so they're floating around as a ghost. What is a ghost? It's just that mentality of attachment, clinging to a person, a place, something like that. In the time of the Buddha, there was that guy whose wife died, and he couldn't bear to lose her, so he kept her in his bedroom. So she, the body decomposes and she's just left as a skeleton. Must be really smelly. He's got a skeleton in the bedroom. And looks after the skeleton, dusts it, all the most beautiful bones. Dusts it, keeps it looking nice, because it's his wife. He wants to stay with his wife. But that's not his wife, is it? His wife is all those good qualities, whatever she did that he was happy with. She talked nicely, she was kind to him, they did things together. All the good karma they made together, that's his real wife. And this is just the material body which is inevitably will go back to the earth. That's not the real wife. So the answer to attachment is not keep your partner's body with you, or your child's body with you, or your parents' body with you. It's to recollect with happiness the good qualities of that person. And you can bring them up, keep them in your heart. Once they're gone, they're still there, aren't they? The memory. But the physical person you have to let go. It's just common sense, but we forget.
Let's acknowledge attitudes by giving three sounds. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.